Hi. So, if you subscribe to me for advice on how to become a millionaire, you probably have been a little bit disappointed by my last couple of videos, which were not about that at all. The good news is I am back to my regular content. The bad news is this will be probably my last video on this topic, and I will explain why at the end of the video. The great news is I will be talking about two books today, so this video is going to be twice as good as my regular videos. So let's jump right in. The first book is called The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. Cool name, so the advice must be good as well. Let's read the description. The Millionaire Fastlane is an international best-selling guide that reveals the quickest path to wealth in order to retire early and actually enjoy the benefits of financial freedom while you're still young. Seems like all such books are talking about the quickest way. And so far, we have seen the quickest interpreted as 17 years and 5 years. So I wonder what this book thinks the quickest is. The method presents mathematical evidence for why traditional routes rarely produce results and how the fast lane dramatically improves your odds. I think we can drop 1 point from our 3-point grading system right away because this book has math in it, and anything with math cannot be easy. Let's prepare our calculators and jump into the reading. Imagine you are going about some regular activity of your daily life, like running errands, as you do, and suddenly a spectacular sight. It's the exotic sports car of your dreams, the exact one you had posters of as a teenager, or maybe even as an adult. Right, so full disclosure, I do not like cars. I had a car and I used it as a tool to get somewhere. I understand that in some cases a car is necessary, like if you live in a rural area or in a country which does not provide enough public infrastructure, or if you have a large family and you need to drive them around all the time. But for me, a car is just a constant source of stress because I was always afraid that it will break and I will panic and I won't know what to do. I was always afraid that I might hit someone and that would be very bad. And if you are not convinced that a car is bad, then consider this. It's a terrible investment. It depreciates immediately after you have bought it, and it is a money sink. You need to buy gas, you need to buy insurance, you need to buy spare parts and stuff like that. So this is just not a good investment. Let's continue. Out of the car steps a person who appears very young and doesn't look that much different from you, except the obvious, which is that they are holding the keys. So the author asked the guy what he does for a living, and the guy said that he was an inventor, which is not a real profession, by the way, but okay. It opened a world of possibilities DeMarco hadn't considered before. People can and do realize wealth at young ages without becoming famous or through sheer luck. Well, being a successful inventor is actually very luck-based. If you have worked in science, you know that, but let's not get distracted here. So, this one encounter inspired the author and he made millions in the next decade. Okay, so decade, kind of in the middle between 17 and 5 years, but the good news is the author talks about millions, plural. Previous two books we talked about assume that you need slightly more than 1 million to be considered a millionaire, and you will live, at best, a middle-class lifestyle without having to work, which is very good, but this book apparently will make you multimillionaire that will be able to live in any way you want. So how do we do that? First, we need to define our money mentality. When it comes to money, there are 3 types of people in the world: sidewalkers, slow laners, and fast laners, as DeMarco calls them. The sidewalkers work random jobs, live in the moment, don't plan ahead, spend their money as soon as they get it, use credit a lot, and count on luck. And according to the book, this is the most common mentality. Okay, so immediately I think he's just talking about poor people, right? People do not have a steady career because they didn't have a chance to find a stable and good paying job, because they didn't go to a university or they got a degree that does not help them to find a good job. And they work random jobs and are indebted, not because they somehow have this wrong mentality about money. It's just they do not have money, so they cannot live any other way. The next mentality is the slow laners, who work steady jobs with decent income, save a lot, avoid debts and risk, and get ready to retire comfortably when they reach retirement age. So basically people who read Baby Steps Millionaires. And finally, the fast laners are people who own business, take calculated risks, reinvest their profits, and rarely find themselves unable to afford things. Alright, so my initial suspicion is confirmed. Basically, the sidewalkers who have the wrong mentality, according to the author, are just poor people, and the slow laners who also have incorrect mentality are middle class. And finally, the fast laners are just businessmen. They have a lot of money because they own a business. I think the author doesn't understand cause-effect relationship. If you are a businessman, of course you earn money from your business, and you are rarely unable to afford things. And if you are a middle class person, you obviously earn most of your money from your salary, and you invest some of that just to save for the future. And if you are poor, then you don't have any money to invest in anything, and definitely don't have money to start a business. Sometimes you even need to go into debt to just keep your family afloat. The author apparently has some worldview I deeply disagree with, but let's keep reading. Maybe the book will explain that I'm wrong. So the author says that anyone can move freely between the lanes, which means DeMarco believes that social mobility is alive and well under late-stage capitalism, which is very optimistic of him. The idea is once you activate your fast lane mentality, you will be able to become a businessman. And it's not the other way around. Like, if you have a lot of money, you can just start a business with them, and then it will keep growing, so you will always have a lot of money. The author learned to code, built a booking website, then sold it for more than $1 million, then waited until it crashed and burned, and bought it back for a quarter of the price, then patched it up and sold it again for several millions of dollars. It sounds like a grift, to be honest. It doesn't sound like an honest model of building a business which is useful to people, but okay. So what actually is the difference between mentalities? The sidewalker apparently takes risks. For example, they play a lottery, but the risks are not calculated, and the sidewalkers just lose their money. Then the slow laners do not take risks. They invest in stable index funds and work stable jobs. And finally, the fast laners, they take risks, but the risks are calculated with math, and that's why they are so rich. And if you still don't entirely understand the difference between mentalities, then here is a helpful test for you with just one question. What would you choose? Option 1. You have 1 in a 6 million shot of winning $50 million right now. Option 2. In 40 years, you have 1 in 6 shot of winning 1 million. And finally, option 3, you have 1 in 7 shot of winning $15 million in 6 years. So what immediately jumps at me is how artificially bad the second option author makes out to be. Because as Baby Steps Millionaires taught us, you only need 17 years to become a millionaire by investing into your pension funds and some index fund and paying out your mortgage and stuff like that. So it's much less than 40 years, and you're also pretty much guaranteed to become a millionaire after that if you spend a sizable amount on all that stuff. It's not 1 in 6 shot. Why would it be? The only way this strategy wouldn't work is if the whole economy just collapses, or if you suffer some catastrophic accident and you cannot work anymore. But I don't think this happens 5 out of 6 times, you know? I think the chances to become a millionaire if you follow Baby Steps Millionaire's advice is more like 90%. But okay. What's even more funny is that the first option, 1 in 6 million shot of winning the jackpot, which is supposed to be very dumb and bad because poor people are just stupid, it's actually much worse in real life, because if you Google the chance of winning a jackpot in like Mega Millions or Powerball, the chance is 1 in 150 to 300 million, so it's about 50 times worse. I don't know why the author felt the need to make it seem better than it is in reality. And I suspect that is because he didn't actually do the math. He didn't do any research. Like, a quick Google search would tell you what the average chance of hitting the jackpot is. But he just pulled the number out of his head, like, 1 in a few million maybe? I don't know. It's stupid anyway. And yes, the chances are very slim, but if you are really poor, then you don't have much of a choice, really. If you work a minimum wage job and you cannot afford to invest a lot of money into retirement or the stock market, then yeah, you probably understand that winning the jackpot is going to be extremely unlikely, but it's still affordable to buy a lottery ticket. So it's not like a crazy stupid idea. I mean, either you accept that you will never be rich, or you take this one in many million chance that you will. But the bottom line is the author clearly didn't do his math here, and that makes me think that this book almost cannot be trusted. But alright, let's continue reading. Maybe it will redeem itself. Now for the math. I hope this time it's not dramatically incorrect. Each money mentality has wealth equations based upon their inherent beliefs about money. Okay, so what are they? A sidewalker operates by the equation of wealth equals income plus debt, because they are poor and they are stupid, and they think that all the money from the loan is their income, because their tiny, poor brain cannot comprehend the fact that they will have to pay it off with interest. I know that there are some people who think like that, but I am pretty sure they are not the majority of people who take out loans. I think most people take out loans because of a necessity, and they do not think that credit is just pure income. But alright. A slow laner follows the equation of wealth equals job plus market investments, which breaks down to wealth equals hourly wage or salary plus compound interest. And then DeMarco roasts this approach by telling you that what if you lose your job? Or what if the market collapses? Well, losing your job and having the whole stock market collapse is a lesser risk than starting a business, especially if you invest in index funds like S&P 500, because they always come up eventually. And if they are not, if for decades S&P 500 just stagnates or falls down, that means something incredibly bad is happening to the whole economy. There is probably some global recession going on for many, many years, and you are still better off with these depreciating investments than people who didn't make them. And if you invested your life savings in some meme stocks or Dogecoin, then I hate to break it to you, but you made a mistake and you should not have done that. Finally, DeMarco asserts that the only way to get rich is to create your own wealth with a business, and not just any old business. The Fastlane equation is wealth equals net profit plus asset value. So basically, what he wants to say is you should invest in a business that not only brings you profit, but also has a high valuation, so you can sell it for a lot of money, even if it's not super profitable. Basically digital businesses that can scale up really quickly, that potentially can have millions of customers, unlike car repair shop or a restaurant. So starting a business is certainly an advice on how to become rich, but the problem is the author is very hypocritical here. He roasts the slow linear approach because apparently it's too risky, but then he just tells you, well, start a business, and this way you will be rich. This is much more risky than having a regular job and investing your money slowly. Yeah, of course, the example of DeMarco himself, who was poor, but then he learned how to code, and then he's created this app. This is all good and fine, but this is just survivor bias. DeMarco succeeded and he became a millionaire. That's good for him, but for each successful businessman, there are hundreds of people who try to start businesses and just fail and spend years of their life and a lot of money, and then nothing works out. I'm not going to demotivate people from starting a business. What I want to say is you should understand that starting business is inherently risky. So if you understand that and you are willing to accept that risk, then start a business. All power to you. But DeMarco's whole line of thinking is that starting a business is just universally good idea for anyone, and every other approach to building wealth is just stupid and bad. And I disagree. But the book is not over. Maybe it will redeem itself. To steer your business in the right direction, DeMarco proposes a few commandments to guide your business. These are control, entry, need, time, and scale. So control means that you need to be in charge of all aspects of the business, and this automatically excludes stuff like MLM or affiliate programs and stuff like that. And this advice makes sense because in MLM or similar models, you will never be as rich as people at the top of the pyramid. Entry means that it should be somewhat difficult to enter your industry because too much competition creates a lot of noise, and if it's something that anyone can do, then your business will drown in competition. You won't be able to actually make a living doing it. Like dropshipping, for example. Everyone's doing it, so most of the people who go into dropshipping right now fail because the customers have too many options and you cannot really stand out in the dropshipping business. Need means that your business has to solve problems or otherwise meet a real need of other people. Again, pretty good advice. It's pretty sad to think that some needs of our society, like healthcare or housing, for example, cannot really be solved this way. Like, you cannot create an app for solving the housing crisis or the healthcare being overburdened and underfunded, right? But you can create some fun app that people will use to escape the problems of everyday life. Right, back to the funny video. So the next commandment is time, and time means that you need to set up the business in such a way that after a while you do not have to spend much time actively being involved in the business. You just reap the profits and either delegate to someone or just spend as little time as possible on making it work. So this is also good advice. I would say that you can actually set up a business where you do something that you genuinely enjoy. Like, I enjoy making YouTube videos. I don't know how successful I am going to be. Maybe I'll never hit like 100 subscribers, never make even 1 cent from it, but I love doing it. And I think the perfect business is something like that. But the next best thing, of course, is the business where you can just step out of it and spend your time on something you enjoy doing. And the book is over. Was it good? I didn't like it. I mean, the book would have been good if it wasn't so classist and if it presented its ideas in a more humble manner. Like, here's the list of ideas for people who are willing to tolerate risks. This is how you should set up your business. The author didn't have to roast the slow laners and the sidewalkers. Not everyone can be a businessman, because if everyone's a businessman, who is going to do any actual work? The book presents itself as this ultimate path, and every other path is stupid, and no one should do anything else other than follow this book. Which is just a shitty approach, to be honest. I don't like that. Depending on the person, there can be no correct strategy in building wealth, because even if mathematics, pure calculations show that some approach is on average better, it doesn't mean that everyone should take it. Let's give you an example. You can win 1 million right now, guaranteed, or you can have 1% chance of winning 200 million. So from the mathematics point of view, everyone should pick the second option, because on average it would bring you $2 million, which is more than 1. But the problem is the chance is small, so most likely you will live with nothing, and I personally would just pick the first option, because it's guaranteed. And maybe some people don't think like me. Maybe some people would prefer to take the risk to become really wealthy. And the thing is, it's fine. Both approaches work. I'm not going to say that the second approach is stupid and bad, and anyone who does it is probably poor. So let's rate the book. I would say 1 out of 3. It promises returns relatively quickly, but it won't be easy and it won't be reliable. And finally, now it's time for our second book, Playing with Fire. You've probably heard about the FIRE movement before, which is an abbreviation of Financial Independence, Retire Early. The idea of FIRE is to combine aggressive savings and low-cost investments to be able to, well, retire early. Pretty much all of the books we looked at up to this point have been centered around this idea of earning enough money so that you can retire and not work anymore. The question is, what's so different about FIRE? Maybe it will give us some really fresh ideas that we haven't seen before. Let's find out. Apparently, within 5 months after learning about FIRE, the author of this book had left his job, cut his family's expenses in half, and set out to make a documentary about the journey. 2 years later, he's just 9 years from retiring, the documentary Playing with Fire is finished, and he has written a book in the process, which is the book we are reading right now. The book reveals hacks for making the most of your finances so that you can focus on what you really care about. FIRE converts. Oh, sounds like a cult. Have used their newfound financial independence to do many things, including retiring early. No way. making flexible career choices, pursuing passion projects, and simplifying their lives. And best of all, the FIRE lifestyle isn't only for wealthy people and doesn't even demand extreme devotion. It's for anyone who wants to live a more intentional life. So far, so good. It is a spiritual movement, it's not a cult, and it is for everyone. Let's dive into the reading. While consumer culture demands that people overwork themselves for unnecessary luxuries, FIRE advocates a frugal lifestyle, freeing up valuable time for focusing on the important things in life. Well, sounds reasonable. Let's go back to the author's story. He and his wife were making 142K per year after taxes and saving about 10K per year, spending the rest on expensive blenders and eating out. Suddenly they realized that they will never be able to save for a house and create a college fund for their daughter this way. Or at the very least they'll have to work their regular jobs until mid-60s and will never pursue a fulfilling career or create their own businesses. After learning about FIRE, Scott Rickens found that if he and his wife cut their expenses in half and invested their savings, they would actually be able to retire in just 10 years. I mean, if you earn 142K after taxes, then you can definitely cut your expenses in half and still live a pretty good life. I wonder how they didn't realize that before. So the next few paragraphs tell us that retiring early means that you don't have to work for money and instead you can do whatever you feel like doing. From starting your own business to doing unpaid charity work or just vibing. Pretty obvious, I guess. Then we get to the FIRE formula, where, you reach financial independence by saving and investing 25 times your annual expenses. And this is exactly the formula that Financial Freedom talked about. Your yearly expenses should be just 4% of the total sum that you save. So that's all fine and good, but in order to save 25 times my yearly expenses, it seems like I will need to invest my entire expenses for 25 years. Okay, maybe a bit less because of the compound interest and such, but still I will have to do it for a long time, and I need some money to live too. I cannot just invest everything that I spend right now. So how do I save enough money in like 10 years? Let's consult the book. The first step is to track where every dollar of your money is currently going. The general goal in FIRE is saving and investing about 50 to 70% of your income. Whoa, I gotta say, if you can just casually save and invest 70% of your income, then you're already in a very privileged position. You are already a rich person. If this seems daunting, an easy way to reduce your spending and save more of your income is to first focus on the largest expense categories: housing, transportation, and food. Okay, so this is again straight up ripoff of the Financial Freedom. I don't know which one came first, and also ideas like these are pretty obvious. You cannot even patent them, I think. But you see some repetition here, right? 5 weeks after Scott and Taylor made the decision to pursue FIRE together, they set off for a year of travel. Yeah, that's what you do when you decide to save a sizable chunk of your income. You're going on a year-long travel journey. Famously the least expensive thing that you can do. In addition to staying with their parents to save money, the idea was to find a more affordable city in which to settle. Okay, so at least they didn't have to pay rent for a house they didn't live in for a year. But I think there are easier ways to find a cheaper place to live. Just Google, maybe? You don't have to spend a year visiting random places just to find one that's cheap. All information about housing prices is online. So eventually they found a small town of Bend, Oregon, which fit them perfectly. Good for them. I was born in a relatively small town and all I wanted to do my whole childhood is to leave. And I eventually did. Now that we slashed our expenses, what to do with the savings? The author and his wife didn't feel comfortable investing everything they had into the stock market, so they split their savings among 3 things: index funds, real estate, and entrepreneurial projects. Alright, let's go over the things one by one. Index funds are all well and good. I recommended them before. I think they're a good idea. The real estate is also kind of reliable, but I would feel dirty investing in it, you know? Housing is a rare commodity in places where people want to live right now, and the prices will continue to just appreciate forever, because the only way they could come down is either the economic system will be radically restructured and the government will build a bunch of public housing, Or the commercial housing will rapidly increase in supply, alleviating shortage and decreasing the prices. And none of those things are likely to happen in the near future, at least. This is why I feel like investing and profiting of this shortage is a little dirty trick, but you do whatever you want with your money. Finally, entrepreneurial projects. This is basically also investment with more risk and more reward compared to index funds. Also pretty good. The next part of the book is about the philosophical aspects of FIRE. An inevitable thing about FIRE is that you have to live frugally, first to accumulate your savings and then living off that 4% of your investments per year. You will have to spend less than you would otherwise spend, both while you're saving money and then after you start living off the profits from the money you accumulated. And it's important that your partner and your friends accept that, and if your friends do not accept that, then just find new friends who already belong to the FIRE community. It's definitely not a cult, though. So, if you're like me and you do not make 150k per year, then you might think, there is no way I can do this, right? Don't worry, the book has it all figured out. FIRE is for people of all income levels, and it can be as flexible as you want it to be. If you don't have a 6-digit salary, you might be wondering if FIRE is just a trend for wealthy people. After all, how are you going to save 25 times your annual expenses if you don't earn very much in the first place? Yeah, that's pretty much what I think. While it might get you to financial independence more quickly, a higher income is by no means necessary to practice FIRE. Well, of course it's not necessary. Nothing about FIRE is strictly necessary. It's not like a centralized organization that can deny you entry if you do not meet some requirements. But it's just so much easier to cut your expenses in half or save 70% of your income if you already have a very high income. If you go from spending 140k per year to spending a measly 70k per year, you're still spending more than my whole income before taxes. In fact, 70k is almost exactly the median household income in the US. Half of the US lives on less than that. Spending 70k per year as a family of two is not some kind of spiritual anti-consumerist lifestyle. It's just a normal amount of money to spend. Anyway, the book has an example of a family from Colorado with a combined income of less than 50k that only spends 32k per year since 2016 and will reach financial independence in 6 years. That is cool if they don't mind this kind of lifestyle. But I have a feeling that it's going to get progressively more demanding if you don't earn a lot of money. I wouldn't be able to find a cheap enough apartment if I slashed my expenses in half. And the added problem is, if you are poor, then you have access to some social security benefits. But if you're not really poor, if you earn a lot, but you just save a lot of it, and you cannot spend a lot of money, then you don't have access to these social security systems. So your life will be much tougher than for people who are actually poor. So there are a few more thoughts in this book. Let's continue reading. Whether you achieve financial independence in 5 or 30 years, the heart of FIRE is valuing happiness over materialism. That is a choice available to everyone, regardless of your income bracket. I think this kind of talk is dishonest because it creates this artificial dichotomy between having money or being happy. It doesn't work like that. A lot of things that make people happy in life require money, and yes, you can find a cheaper way to do something like travel by hitchhiking, but I don't think it's a good idea, for example, for a single woman to travel, staying in shady hostels and hitchhiking because she chose happiness or materialism. Another big stumbling block for many when it comes to FIRE is how extreme it sounds. Though some FIRE converts go to extreme lengths to save money, your approach to FIRE can and should be flexible. Yeah, flexibility is another buzzword of basically you have a range of equally bad options. You can live an extremely Spartan lifestyle for a decade, or you can live a less extreme Spartan lifestyle for 3 decades. But in this case, especially if you start FIRE in your 30s, 30 years later you will be pretty close to your actual retirement. So in this case, the movement should probably drop the final E from its acronym. On the other extreme, let's say you want to FIRE in 5 years. And let's say you want to be very frugal and live on only 30k per year. In this case, you multiply 30k by 25 and you get 750k that you need to save in just 5 years. So you will need to save 150k per year just to get to this income, and you have to be already very rich to be able to do that. Okay, so that was Playing with Fire. Was I too harsh on the movement? Yes, I was. But again, I don't like when a niche choice is presented as everyone can do that. It can be flexible. It doesn't matter how much money you make. You can and should choose our movement because it's perfect. It's just the best thing ever. You will be happy. And if you don't choose our movement, then you probably don't value happiness that much. You probably value money more than happiness. And that's pretty dumb of you, to be honest. So I would give this book and the entire movement 1.5 out of 3. Fire is reliable and either kinda fast or kinda easy, but not both, unless you are very, very rich. Okay, I think it's time to wrap this up. I read 4 books about becoming a millionaire. Actually, I read a couple of more, and they are all the same. They all give exactly the same advice, which basically falls into 3 categories. One is basic financial hygiene, like do not go into debt, or have an emergency stash of money, or don't buy useless expensive stuff. The second advice is try to invest sizable sums for a long time with some kind of a multiplier. This concerns your retirement fund or your investments in some index funds. And finally, start a business. This is the only realistic way of getting rich relatively quickly, but it won't and cannot be reliable. And it will take you a lot of time and effort to pull off. So yeah, I hope the books will have some interesting wealth hacks that I would have never thought about without them. But they didn't teach me anything fundamentally new that I didn't know already. I mean, they're a nice starting point for people who have no idea about money, and they do give some specific and useful advice. They do give you a path forward that you can follow up to a certain point or all the way, and that is great. But the road to wealth will inevitably be long, hard, or risky, and most likely you will have to pick at least 2 out of 3. That was it. I hope you won't unsubscribe from my channel because I'm no longer going to make these millionaire videos. If you don't do that, then I promise I will provide you with good content. Until then, bye bye.